Good morning, everybody. We are back for the second session, which is on Think Privacy through Think Technology. Today we have with us Mr. Amar. Hi, Amar. Thank you so much for joining. He has close to 8 years of experience with Microsoft before he started his entrepreneurial journey with OneDPO, which is our privacy platform, which helped to address real security and privacy risks. And I would like to thank Mr. Bhaskar. He has 2 decades of experience at the intersection of technology and business development, worked with IBM and Capgemini in the past. He has co-founded Ziroh Labs, whose mission is to dedicate to the singular purpose of developing privacy-preserving technology. Thank you, Bhaskar, for joining us today. And then I would like to introduce Mr. Sameer. He has worked in information. Hi, Sameer. He has close to 2 decades of experience. He has worked with Symantec, Deloitte, Lockheed Martin in the past. 2 years ago, he founded Ardent Privacy, which provides easy-to-use, high-speed data minimization solution to discover, identify, and minimize personal data. I again welcome all the panelists to today's session. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you so much, Ms. Rama Videshi. She is the CEO of DSCI, for moderating this session. Over to you, Rama.
Thank you, Sonam. Welcome, Amar, Sameer, and Bhaskar. Thank you for joining us. And thank you to all the delegates who have joined us in this session, also in the morning session, which was moderated by my colleague Vinayak. I think the first session really set the stage in terms of, the technology stack, and we had three senior industry leaders who've been in this journey of building technology solutions, particularly for security and now data protection and data security and privacy. Today's session, I'll be joined by Amar, Sameer, and Bhaskar, where we'll be looking at how we have evolved towards thinking of technology solutions whenever we want to solve a privacy problem or we want to solve a privacy in the enterprise. Interesting, I think in the previous session, one of the speakers was commenting to my colleague Vinayak that we are DSCI, we are, Data Security Council, and we were not something else. And for the last 11 years, it's extremely, heartening for me and my team that when we talk about economy, no longer is the focus on just economy. There's a lot of focus on digital economy. And in the last 2-3 years, there's a lot of focus on data economy, right? Similarly, when we talk to a CXO or we talk to a regulator or we talk to a global law firm, we talk to, IT departments in the states, in India or in the central ministry, right? There is a lot of focus on privacy. So the debates and deliberations of privacy are spanning all the way from Supreme Court to probably drawing rooms of the common man. That's one journey that we are seeing, right? Similarly, when we look at a technology stack, I think 10 years back, it was all about what is the enterprise business technology stack that a bank is adopting or a telco is adopting or a oil and gas is adopting. Maybe 4-5 years back, it was all about the enterprise security technology stack, right? Whereas now we are beginning to see an emergence of an enterprise technology stack purely for data protection and privacy, right? If I'm not too sure if any one of you all have seen the latest global technology vendor report for privacy, which IAPP brings out. Apparently, it's the fourth edition. And I was just scanning through that report. It's interesting to note that between 2017 to 2020, the number of privacy technology vendors or technology companies have moved from 44 to 304. So look at the scale. When you talk about a hockey stick approach for growth, I don't think there's a better hockey stick that you can see where in the last 4 years, the technology vendor ecosystem worldwide has moved from 44 to 304. And I'm sure there are a lot more early stage startups across the world and in India, which still don't feature in this report, which we will see as we go along. There's still 6 months to go in 2020. We'll look at how many more. I'm sure this is going to grow. And another observation I've seen is it's not a general privacy management solution or something that's going to help a DPO or a CISO. We are seeing really niche technology vendors. And the biggest growth that I have observed from this report is There are more than 140, 110 solutions, particularly in data mapping and data discovery. So when you look at think privacy, think technology, I think data mapping and data discovery is something that's really up, on everybody's mind when it's an entrepreneur or a technology startup, right? And another interesting thing that I've seen, maybe we need to give due credits to GDPR, whether we like it or not. The 554 startups or technology vendors came on the scene, all of them in the last year, in user rights management or user rights, responses. So we see a big tick in this area where, particularly in user and subject rights, data subject rights management. And we are also seeing a lot of new startups coming in consent management. So truly, I think now privacy is moving from a compliance function to a business opportunity area where several startups, services companies, technology companies, the big technology companies can venture into building niche technology products. And I think all the three colleagues on my panel have ventured that way to be able to build technology product companies in the area of privacy and data protection. And what is one thing common I've noticed, based on Sonam's intro, is all four of us have come from big technology companies and now are focusing either on building a product company on data protection and privacy, or we in DSCI, and my role currently is something where we are evangelizing privacy to governments, to users and banks and all of that, right? So all of us have moved from large tech companies, so I'm sure there's a certain experience that we bring to the table. So I will broadly look at what are the growth drivers where privacy and technology solutions, requirement of technology solutions for privacy, and where there's a big opportunity for new startups to be incubated or startups to diversify into privacy technology solutions is one. On one side, we see the regulator, right? Data protection regimes and regulations coming worldwide, including in India, and expected personal data protection bill, right? And the GDPR set a certain benchmark for regulation. Similarly, there's a lot of competition commissions and Department of Justice kind of entities giving focus to privacy. So it's not just a security breach, there's equal attention to privacy breach that is coming up, and breach notification, and how do you do incident response. And on the other side, we are seeing the increasing rise of consumer expectation of a platform provider, of a digital service provider, so that they retain their trust and the data. So we have on one side the user expectations, on one side the compliance obligations that regulators are paying. And I think if you need to meet this both, it's no longer a process or a compliance checklist. There needs to be a technology solution and technology stack which helps you implement that. And broadly, my session will look at that with experiences from all my three fellow panelists who have gone down this journey. So maybe we can start with Amar. Amar, you have now taken up this journey of becoming an entrepreneur and particularly picking up this particular domain. So, what has urged you, and where do you see this thing, privacy thing, technology? Why did you look at building a technology solution rather than a services arm to be able to help implement, or a consulting arm? So, just if you can start sharing.
I'll give a little bit of context so that I'll start a little high, then I'll get into why. So I grew up in India. Privacy was not a part of our culture. We used to live in a room. There are 7 people slept, and only six shoes there. The last guy who's getting up cannot go to the class, right? He doesn't have shoes. So that's the culture we grew up, back in India. So privacy was something we have to take it. We had to think from a very high level. What is the implication? Privacy is not about just protecting my browsing history. No, no, no. It is a lot bigger than the issue is a lot bigger, right? That's one. So if you think of how it has changed over years, that companies started collecting data, they started using data, they're far ahead, right, in terms of collecting and using. One important thing that happened in GDPR, right? If you take one thing from this talk, is GDPR switched the ownership of the data from the companies back to the end customers. If Microsoft has your data, Microsoft in earlier times can say, hey, it's my data. I can do whatever I want because I collected it. But that has changed. That has changed. It's to say that the end customer whose data they hold, they have rights on it, right? It's like a bank. You deposited some money, you can always go back, say, give me back my money. They have to give it. Data is similar, right? Now you think data is an asset, and you are given to a company, and the company is holding it. The power dynamics completely changes. Now, company has to think, I'm holding data, somebody else's data, not my data. Now, the risk tolerance, the awareness they should, the processes they should build, everything changes. That's a game changer, right? You should take that, you would take key point in here, right? Second is there's always attention, right? I'm collecting data with in this world, in this time. If you are not using your data, you will be dead. Yeah, any company will be dead, right? So you're talking about personalization, you're talking about ingesting all kind of data inside. So there's a tension, right? There's a tension to use the data because I want to improve my company, I want to make it more money, and I have the compliance and what Rama mentioned, like the user's expectation. So I had to balance this. That's where the technology comes in. It's easy to say I will not collect any data, but it doesn't exist. It's easy to say I will not care about privacy, I will use all the data. That just cannot be done. Now you have to balance. How do you balance? You have massive data. How do you balance? That's where you need technology. You cannot do it by just processes. You cannot hire people and just go over data because the volume, variety, and velocity of data is increasing. So you need deep technology, and that's where technologies like us and the country like us, where we have so many technologies, can play a very critical role. Right? That's where I saw the opportunity and said, "Hey, fine. This is where we can make a difference." Jumped on, right? So, rewinding back, the thing is, it's hard for us to, from a culture from India, privacy was something alien to us in some sense, but you have to elevate yourself. Privacy is a bigger problem, bigger umbrella. It has a lot bigger implications. It can even sway elections. You, you think of that way, right? You can sway elections, right? If you sway elections, you don't need a war. You want to take over a country, or you want to change a government, you can do it over social media, and we can target. Everything can be done using data, right? Who likes what, things like that. So data has a lot bigger implications. Countries are realizing it, people are realizing it. As countries realizing it, they're tightening the regulation. As the regulation tightens, the data collection is not going to slow down. You need technology. That's where I see the opportunity. That's where we got it. I can go on and on for hours on this, but I'll stop here and give others an opportunity so they can a little bit tell about their journey.
Yeah, I'll come back to you, Amar. So, Bhaskar, particularly you, I think, have focused on a really deep tech solution for building, privacy preserving technologies using encryption. So, what is the actual enterprise business problem were you trying to solve when you envisioned your company and the technology solution that you were building?
Right, right. So first of all, thank you for having me here, and Rama and the entire DSCI team. Awesome job on trying to put India on the map in the context of privacy and cybersecurity, right? I'm very annoyed when you prefix Israel or suffix Israel in front of a company. Suddenly, it's very valuable, but that is not the case for India. You guys are doing great to make that happen. In terms of our thesis, right? I think the key term that I would like this audience to keep in mind when they're thinking about technology is the term enforceable, right? So we were deeply motivated by how do you build technology that is enforceable. Now, all of us have signed terms and conditions in the past where you're putting a workload on the cloud or using storage. We like very simply say, I agree. But none of us can really enforce that, right? So there's this notion of trust, that I trust Amazon will not exfiltrate my data. I trust GCP will not do anything bad. But you cannot necessarily enforce it, right? So it's only when you have a technical solution that you can actually enforce it. So obviously all this regulation is there, but the technology solution lets you enforce it. So that was one of the motivation, that how do you really prove to someone that you are secure? You don't have to worry. You don't have to trust somebody by this notion of human trust, but that you can literally enforce your right. So that was one. And the other motivation is really to make a very strong choice that enterprises have to make. The key thing that you have to remember is privacy and convenience, right? You really can't have both, right? You have to choose that do you want privacy or do you want convenience? It's incredibly difficult to have both, right? So our motivation was that if you can find a solution that gives the end user the privacy and the convenience both, and I'll talk about it a little more in the later, will they opt for it? Easy to use. Sometimes there's a lot of good things around, but you don't use it because it's very difficult to use it. Like kids don't eat vegetables because vegetables don't taste good, right? So can you make it so easy that people will adopt it? So ease of use and ease of enforcing, those were some of our motivations for kind of doing this. Not to mention that I was deeply attracted to the fact that the core, the core mathematical algorithms of encryption were co-developed at the Indian Institute of Science. So, can't be a better place than that to do something deep tech. So that was also a personal inspiration for me.
Thank you. What about you, Samir? What energized you to get you to do the startup and particularly pick whatever is the solution area that Ardent had looked at, and what is the enterprise business problem did you really have in mind which will meet with your technology stack?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for having me, Rama, Vinayak, and entire data security. So I completely agree with the data security versus not network security Council of India. So thank you. So I'll tell you a little bit about my journey. So I come from very like like how much 20 years doing all this architecting the security solutions for customers in various capacity, both audit, consulting, product development. One thing which is bothering me for a long time that all the data centric portion earlier panel covered some part of that, and I come from heavy security technology background is we are not looking at data at all. So when are we doing security? I mean, all if any CISO or CIOs or people, we do not have visibility into data, and we are basically designing security. And we did ourselves. I think that was a journey we took. When I started in '99, we were very good with all the security technology, or we looked from a very perimeter centric angle. And I wanted to that just does not make sense in terms of today's world, because I think all the data breaches you see, you are not counted how many security tools you have on perimeter, and we still have, including this big firewalls, and you move from the regular network centric to application centric, whatever. But unless we know our data, we're not gonna do a good job at security, and that's what actually inspired us. So we work in a very specialized area. I think there is a data deluge, right? We were happy in a non-digital world, so I think whole privacy concept actually becomes more relevant or more important from user perspective. Is I nobody had access to my data before when I had paper records, right? The risk was much less, at least the privacy risk, because only your doctor will have your records or your financial bank will have records. There is no net banking. Today we are generating huge billion bytes of data every day, and at that and with that you are actually losing privacy as well, because you don't know who has access to what. And the way all these IT or digital transformations have happened, security has got this little attention initially, and because the priority of my company is basically get the system in place. So none of anybody's like fault, but you don't look when you buy a new phone. Even if I'm a security guy, the security is not very first thing come to my mind, because I have to have a functionality first, right? And we struggle through that overall industry, but I think it's right now the time, in terms of we need to be really data centric. So we work in especially a data minimization area, and data discovery and GDPR and CCPA compliance comes very handy. I think everybody has those kind of what is the context of data and discovery. So we identify. So very first step, and that was actually counted when I learned in way back in 2002 ISO 27001. Where is your data inventory? So we basically help you map your data, identify where it is, and very first thing, you are storing way more data than you need. and that is basically causing the risk. So data minimization is the particular value prop we are doing, because if we know our data and we minimize that as a preventive control, your risk is anyway automatically gonna get reduced in terms of your whole security posture. So that's the area we are working in, and of course the CCPA and GDPR. Thanks to them, mostly the push is coming from the regulatory side. Unfortunately, because eventually even my CISOs or even myself, when I was doing those projects, you need a reason for those fundings to come by from your business, and the both GDPR and CCPA kind of regulations are doing pretty good job. I expect the same in India. So I'll
Yep.
stop there for talking about my product or myself, but happy to have actually deep dive into this discussion in terms of only one statistics. Actually, I want to one more open story about that. I actually make a note of that. 90% of the enterprise security budget, and I want everybody to look at your budget, right? Where your security dollars are going, 90% is going for anything but the securing data. So you are spending on your malware solution, four types of malware solution, nothing wrong with the malware, but what I'm saying is you need to consolidate that. Mainly your firewalls, right? All these big budgets, networking, security equipment, only 10% for actually securing data. And that's a very interesting statistics done by Thils e-security, and that's what we got to focus on.
Thank you. So thank you all three of you for kickstarting this session. See, typically an enterprise CIO or CTO was always preoccupied building sourcing technology solutions or building technology solutions to map the entire journey of the customer, right? Across the life cycle, and what are those moments of truth at which the customer is engaging with the business. Whereas now the entire focus on discovering this entire life cycle of data as it traverses through the enterprise, right? And identifying where all, also even inventorizing where all this data is being collected, processed, and probably shared with third parties for further processing or value addition services, or engaging with some fintechs if you're a bank, right? Inventorizing all of that and mapping this data, and also then looking at how do you put the controls in place, whether it's for de-identification, whether it's for pseudonymization or for further analysis, right? So I think what is really the biggest preoccupation for any CIO or even the CISO or DPO, if they have one, is always about now currently it's the language that people are talking about is, can I discover the entire life cycle the way the personal, particularly when it comes to personal data, but it's also, I think they're equally worried about unstructured data and the way it traverses, what is the entire life cycle that it traverses within the boundaries of my enterprise and with the entire ecosystem with which an enterprise may be collaborating. And most of the other which you may be collaborating could be third parties, could be vendors, could be sometimes regulators, right? So how do we solve this entire life cycle of data through technology solutions? This is where we are talking about think privacy, think technology, and privacy engineering being one of the most important subjects that is gaining a lot of attention worldwide, particularly from the startup community, right? So any thoughts from each one of you on this? Who would like to go first? There's no particular order.
We focus primarily on privacy engineering, so I'll take this question, and others feel free to jump. So, the way we think about this problem, there are different order of problems, right? Inventorying is one big problem. Where is my data? Then second level of thinking is who owns the data, who's accessing the data, who's using the data. Second, then how are we sharing? What controls we can put so that it's used for the right purposes? So there are different levels of the problem we see. So as I was mentioning, the GDPR kind of forced people to know and treat data differently. So they start inventorying, doing data impact assessments, these kind of things. These are the first order problems, right? Once they start identifying, then they said, let's anonymize it, right? That's the second problem. Like, let's remove the personal data. Then the problem with that is I can remove your name, give an ID, but if I remove your date of birth, if I remove your location, the data becomes not that useful, right? Then the new set of technologies are emerging. and the regulations also caught up, right? The California law said if I can take two set of data, both anonymized and merged and identify a person, then it becomes personal data. For example, I can take your gender, zip, where you stay, right, and your date of birth. I can identify you, then it becomes a personal data. Now, how do you solve that problem? I cannot anonymous anymore. Then people started talking about new set of privacy enhancement techniques, right? These are where you will measure privacy, saying that, hey, what is the risk in this data asset, right? I have 10 rows, and there is one person with age 42 having this particular row. Let me add some noise, right? That's called differential privacy. So you will add, willingly, you will add more noise into the data so that you want to protect privacy. So what you're trading off is accuracy of the data versus protecting privacy. These are the newer concepts that are emerging in privacy engineering. So there are different levels of problems, right? Data inventory is immediate, right? People are coming because of GDPR, because of regulations. I need to first know where my data is. Then I'm going to look at how can I anonymize. Then I had to think about how am I going to make sure I'm protecting the privacy well. That's privacy enhancing technologies. Right? Then you want to share the data with somebody. Now, if I complete encrypt and share it with somebody, they have to decrypt to do something about the data, right? I cannot just use the data as is. So then how can you encrypt? Still somebody can use it. That homomorphic technology, those kind of technologies are coming up. So there are different levels of technology that's emerging. As entrepreneurs or anybody who's interested, look across the space. Some are immediate, some are emerging. I would put privacy engineering as emerging. Still, there is not many tools, products available yet. This is a great opportunity to solve a problem, right? For the area we took is we only focus on big data environments, and we focus on measuring, monitoring privacy, right? That's what we do. We privacy and some amount of security, that whatever falls into data protections umbrella, and that's our focus. There are so many different areas we can focus on, right? All in the privacy engineering space. So the takeaway is that privacy, do not think as, hey, it's all about one. There are multiple levels of privacy and deeper technology you can build. This is from the enterprise stack. If you look at consumer stack, there's another different angle. But from enterprise stack, new set of technologies are emerging. Please pay attention to those, and that's where a lot of opportunities will emerge, especially for technologies.
So if I may add to that, I think if I concur with Amar, but I also want to shed some light on some dilemmas that this industry really has, right? And let me use an example that probably all of us can relate to. So we can talk all the one we want about privacy, but for 45 minutes of free Wi-Fi at the airport, we happily give our phone numbers, right? So if you kind of go back, let's say 30 years, right, 3 or 4 decades, so let's kind of talk about like 1980s, 90s when encryption and all were there, right, and being used. So the notion was that you could lock away data that needs to be secure, keep it somewhere, and that's fine, right? That was okay then, like 3 decades, 4 decades back. But if you come to today's world, and if I go to the chief marketing officer or the chief executive officer and say that, okay, you have all this data that's very private, and I'm going to lock it, encrypt it, and keep it away, right? It is no longer acceptable. Now, why is that no longer acceptable? Is because it is that data that drives his business. I need to know that Rama travels 5 times every 1 month so that I can send her ads. I need to know that Amar travels a lot and likes, maybe Thai cuisine, so I need to send him a lot. So this data, what we do with it has changed a lot from the 70s to 2000. So I can't lock it away, right? Now, traditionally, the CISO's office has been concerned more with unauthorized system behavior, right? Firewalls and perimeter security and Active Directory and things like that, unauthorized system behavior. And what the privacy world is more or less focused on is unauthorized PII processing, right? But you need, now every single company on this earth needs this data to process, to make sense out of it, right? So while there is a lot of lip service being paid on how this is incredibly important, I'm yet to see a company, a commercial company growing well that would have a very well-defined line item about privacy-preserving technologies, right? Of course, from a GDPR perspective and all that is there, which is like more process-centric and all that stuff, right? But from a purely technology perspective, at least there's a lot of lip service on the ground. Because each time you use a privacy preserving technique, whether it's anonymization, pseudonymization, and if you come down the chain from encryption, your utility of the data starts to decrease. You can do less and less and less and less with that data, right? And this comes in the way of you running your business. This comes in the way of you growing like the way VCs want companies to grow, like the one VC wants growth hacking, right? And so we have to deal with this a little bit as to what is, how much of data can be processed. So I think the real teeth will really come when regulation really has a lot of power, right? Not just guidance, but a lot of power. And the other point is also, I don't know if that really helps. I don't know if it's so cynical about the industry, but Experian had this huge data privacy, 150 million American records, et cetera, et cetera. But probably in less than a year, their market cap and earnings per share, or all the metrics that is traditionally used to judge the health of a financial health of a company, were pretty much where it should be, right? So it's almost like it did not matter, right? So I think from a technological perspective, the use cases are relatively niche, right? I can't imagine many SaaS companies going full out to lock their data, because they will not be able to run algorithms. They will not be able, at least not as easily as they can today. They will not be able to make sense of all the data that they're collecting, and that is almost unacceptable if you are chasing growth.
So you have really articulated the dilemma, and as you build technology solutions. So how do you convince, when you talk to particularly the question is back to Bhaskar, you talk to an enterprise CIO to be able to invest in a very niche technology product for privacy preserving, because on the other side, he or she is supposed to be the enabler of technology for the business, where business can monetize the data better, can build hyper personalized services for their end users or consumers, right? So given that CIO is meant to be a business enabler using technology for the CMO, CFO, and whoever, right? How do you convince him or her to be able to invest in a privacy preserving technology? Is it just regulation, or is it being able to, in the long run, earn the trust of the consumer? Where do you
Right,
pitch?
right. Um, so I think, again, these are my personal views, right? So I think for any product company, you have to probably spend a lot of time to figure out what is the use case that you want to chase, right? Think of this way. I don't think there is any CIO in the world who is going to spend money to protect something that is very simple, right? For example, phone numbers or emails. We have almost been desensitized to the point where we really don't care also, right? Like, I am part of a privacy preserving company, but I actually subscribe to so many newsletters. I feel almost half the world has my phone number, right? Uh, when I talk about the use cases, there was this interesting study I was reading about uh, the monetary value that you can attach to different types of data. Right at the top of the pyramid is really clinical data, healthcare data, financial fraud data. Right, and at the bottom of the pyramid, you'll have standard things like emails, phone numbers. If you look at the dark web, you can probably purchase a data set of 10 million email addresses for like $1,000, right? So there is no. So if you follow the economic decision-making process for a CIO, which is always the case, he's not going to spend $1 million to protect something that is worth like $1,000, or at least what the market thinks it is. So I think the use cases has to be very selected very, very precisely. And for the right use cases, I'm sure not CISOs, but probably more, the data side of the house. The CISO is totally focused on keeping the lights on. He's not losing sleep, in my opinion, about data as much, right? He's not measured at the end of the year in his appraisal if there are privacy related issues. It's a very emerging field. So like in fraud detection and all, where an incident can have a tremendous monetary impact, right? And just to kind of help elaborate this scenario for all others at the conference. So let's say I have part of my data set that is an HDFC bank, part of my data set that is an ICICI bank, part of my data set that is an Axis bank. To really tell that this is a fraud with a high degree of probability, data sets need to work together, right? However, neither ICICI Bank is going to share their data with HDFC, where HDFC will not share with Axis, no matter how much they come on TV and talk about interoperability, right? Building your moats is such a powerful concept. So in those cases where advanced technologies like multi-party computation, homomorphic encryption can really help these enterprises share data for a different point of view, I think those use cases are interesting because it's a funded use case, right? A use case where, okay, I'm going to encrypt all of my data set from name, email, phone number so that it's all secure. In my experience, I've not seen someone fund something like that. The value they derive from actually extracting insight from that and sending you ads or sending you custom offers or customizing your experience is far more than locking it away and keeping it away for the sake of privacy.
So thank you. Oh, that was, I mean, you still think that there's a lot of lip service to privacy. So I think Data Security Council has a lot more work to do when we engage with enterprises in India or other countries also. Samir, before, I think I see a lot of questions coming our way before we start opening up. Samir, from your journey and particularly as you engage with global customers, what do you think are the future areas for technology in privacy? If you can comment on that. I also, if you can comment on, I think the biggest dilemma that any DPO or even a CISO will face is previously maybe all data was within the enterprise, right, on a secure environment. Now you need to be able to do this privacy and data protection also where your own enterprise data is probably residing in untrusted environments because there's a lot of integration with third party platforms. You really don't have control over that, right? So if you can comment a little bit from your own journey on what do you think are the upcoming technology requirements of a DPO or a CISO or a CIO, and is there something that needs more innovation in terms of new use cases to be able to deal with your privacy obligations when your own enterprise data is probably residing on untrusted environments?
Yeah, so matter of fact, what I'm seeing, if you are seeing what currently is going on, I think it's mainly the compliance driven, right? And there is a lot of attention towards this data subject, right to know, right to delete, not as much. So there is, and I think it's a good way or good takeaway. There is currently it's just workflow based. And I want to make that point very clear that right now, if you see the big $1 billion valuation companies and are basically the workflow based companies. So what they are doing right now is creating a very basic awareness how to manage process, what are your obligations. Nothing wrong with that, but eventually privacy is all about what data you own, what data you have. So unless you know that data and go deep into, you're not going to able to enforce those controls. But you might be seeing all these big companies, or rather the larger market cap companies privacy today are workflow based companies, but it is evolving. They are getting into the more data discovery aspect of it. So I would say discovery is upcoming, number two in terms of taking market share, and that mainly drives from the data subject access request. So from GDPR or CCPA perspective, if I'm Samir, and you are Rama, and you request Bank of America, give me all my information, they are subject to provide that information, right? So that needs a deep discovery, or rather discovery, to provide you that information. And there is a workflow around it. People need to have email or the way. Privacy preserving, like homomorphic encryption and all those techniques, or what we're talking about, they are upcoming, not yet there. But I think the biggest thing which we should, and it will eventually take little bit of time to mature, and which we are also chasing or basically doing, is privacy by design. Mainly the things need not, and I think that it should be made so simple that people are not basically need to do extra effort. So the problem now is legacy data. I have these zettabytes of terabytes of data, and I have no idea how much data is there. So I don't think there's gonna be a great, or rather perfect job being done. But one thing we can do, and I think that's the next thing should happen, as per my opinion, is okay, whatever happened so far, right? You can do this much, but what about my data from tomorrow, right? So, for example, I have an obligation for last 3 years of data, how I'm treating that data, right? And what all different people are working on different problems. Encryption is a good control. But again, deletion is another thing. I don't see the right to be forgotten implemented at all these companies, even with the GDPR requirements, they are scared to delete data, and I think that's not a good approach, because we're gonna find the data breaches that you actually put a request to companies that, hey, delete my data, and you find that in AWS or somewhere on the internet, that data found later. And we have seen that um, on the similar line past. So I see the privacy engineering still is a booming area. It's just gonna take little bit of time to mature. People are still at workflow stage, and that happened to the security industry in the past. People used to have firewalls with no rules enabled, right? I remember one of the biggest telco had a firewall for a long time without any rules. So I think it will get there, but I think more privacy by design efforts
Yes.
we do, or people adopt those technologies, they will save more money in terms of. So we need to know what that data is going to be used for, and the control define that. And another thing, I just want to piggyback on the earlier question, I think you posed to Bhaskar, was how do I convince my board, hey, I need money for privacy? And the reason I'm taking that's very important. If you see Apple taking that
My question was more on how do you convince your customer to invest in privacy technology?
yeah. And of course I need to enable my customer. So there are two things, it has to come from business, and business needs to understand that its privacy is, people gonna stop giving data if you basically dishonor their data. You see, I don't pick up 90% of the phone calls today, right? I
Yep.
don't respond to the 99% of the email today, right? I put those in spam. So their revenues, if people, there are no open rates for email or not receiving rates, it's going to automatically change. So you need to be very contingent. Your privacy branding has to be super neat. And I think that particular part, if you care about privacy and tell that to your consumer at the same time, they're gonna basically say and trust you more, make you a big brand. I think that's also one of the big point.
So but
We should make
you brought a
privacy is
point
the
that
enabler, not the disabler. Sorry.
so you highlighted very clearly that in the long run, business needs to look at privacy not just as compliance but as a business
Enabler.
differentiator, so that you have the consumer trust. I just wanted to spend a little time before we start taking questions on Amar. What are you seeing as the new white spaces? If you're going to invest in a new startup, what are the big ticket use cases? I was surprised when I was reading this global technology vendor report for privacy that there were 54 new companies, vendors that have come up on the scene in the just last 1 year around data subject rights management.
Yeah.
Or I think some 24 companies in incident response.
Yeah.
So, what
So
do you think are those new white spaces? Because it can also guide some of the budding
yeah.
entrepreneurs.
So one, I would definitely agree with Samir and Bhaskar on. Still, it is compliance driven, right? Think privacy equal to pollution, right? If you ask individually, they will not get pollution. You have to pass laws and regulation and be enforced. That's roughly how it is right now, right? We may not like it, but that's what it is, right? So if you ask individually to follow certain rules, very hard. So it's primarily compliance driven. So law comes, people chase and uh, pay attention to it. So what has, for example, give an example. There's a large tech company. What they did is we were talking to them, and the problem they were facing is with the CCPA coming in, there are two different data sets. and people were merging fine. Now with the CCPA, they cannot merge anymore because once you merge, it becomes personally identified. Now they shut down the entire data lake for 4 months to figure out what to do with the data. Right? Think of there are marketing campaigns, like millions of dollar marketing campaigns done without proper data feedback. Right? How is the campaign performing? So a company is willing to take that hit, right? Business hit, to avoid violations. Why? Because two reasons. One is regulations. Second is customer trust. Right. So, but will they act just for customer trust? Yes, big companies. But if you want to take majority companies, it will be still driven by compliance. There's no change in it. At least for next near future, it will be compliance driven. So what is changing in the industry is it is privacy currently sits under legal. You should now know if you think of companies who you're pitching around, the sits under legal. So once you sits under legal, they're not technology savvy. That's it's like I'm not legally savvy, so they're not technology savvy. So they're thinking more from a process standpoint. Do I have set of things, steps, so that I can show to the regulators or to my board that I'm GDPR compliant or CCPA compliant, right? What I need is a workflow, right? Is it implemented? Is it working? As secondary. I have workflow, right? I'll implement a product like OneTrust and say, hey, I've done it. I have a process. I've done my job, right? Now that work is shifting to CISOs and CIO, CISOs, and say on security side because they want to automate it. They want to repeatedly doing it. Then they say, well, you know engineers. If you ask them to twice, they'll automate, right? You say, give it to engineer, hey, do it twice, thrice, they'll automate. They find a way to automate. That's what I think is my point of view, how it will happen in the marketplace. Right? Now it will shift from a legal process point of view to more operational point of view. How will I take care of this massive data, repeatedly measure privacy, repeatedly make sure people are adhering to, reducing my privacy risk in a larger scale, right? There you need technology. So that's where you should, if you focus on process, this is not the time. That's been done, that's what I will say. Because if you have been in the market 3 years back, probably not right now, right? Because big companies like OneTrust, many are doing a very good job and very hard to go and fight in that space. I would rather focus on the next order problems where you need technology, right? You cannot be running a process and workflow and solve it. No, these will be emerging. It will be only seen in few places. You shouldn't be discouraged because of that. You are going to bet on it. That's going to grow, right? That's where I would structure that. But you have to know businesses are willing to take financial hit to protect privacy. Willing to. So that's a good sign, right? So once you have it, you have to take take some time for it to mature. We have to be patient and we have to build the right technologies and keep going at it. Okay. Does it make sense? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Bhaskar, you have something to say?
No, I think that's the right thing, right? What Amar mentioned. It's definitely compliance driven. It's under legal. So I think the time as of today is more suited for consulting folks to work in privacy area than for deeply technical folks. I think the future is there when it will move potentially to real technology to solve it. But today, I think the way I see it, it's kind of more suited in a broader sense. Of course, there are always exceptions. In a broader sense, it's more suited for consulting, right? It's more suited for trainings. It's more suited for implementing workflows. It's more suited for other things.
Sure. But I think increasingly we are seeing the landscape of privacy focused technology startups
Exactly.
gaining momentum. I
Sure.
mean, we've seen that in the last year because we ourselves started exploring privacy as an opportunity area when we started doing use case workshops so that we can discover business use cases to
Right.
solve a privacy problem. We're seeing a lot of traction
Yeah.
in the
Right.
last 1 year to 2 months.
Companies are also,
So,
because of the shift I was talking, they're looking for technologies to solve it. That's we see interest for sure.
Yeah, to budding entrepreneurs out there, I think make sure you chase things for which there is a budget line item in whoever you're going to sell it to, right?
Agreed.
So digital rights management might not look fancy because it's been there for a while, but I think companies will spend on digital rights management far more easily than they would actually do on encryption, right? So think of things for which there is a budget.
so you're saying build a solution where you can chase the money, right?
I mean, at the end of the day, if there is no margin, no mission, right? Nobody wants to be a struggling, hungry artist forever.
Yes, yes.
Totally, totally agree with you. So, I mean, before I open up the questions, maybe I'll just do one round of questions to all three of you all with your experience. And also, when we study the landscape, we are seeing bigger investment uptakes in privacy startups or privacy product companies. I've seen in the last 1 year multiple rounds of 50 million global startups, maybe $50 million investment deals, $100 million, $200 million, right? And also Series A, Series B. So, what has been your experience personally, and what are you observing on the investor interest? Because typically, even maybe 3 years back, 4 years back, security startups struggle to get investor attention, which has changed quite a bit in the last few years. Are you beginning to see investor interest? But at least globally, there is evidence that there is investor interest in privacy technology startups, and we see big ticket deals happening. Where do you see that? What has been your experience? Do we need to do more to evangelize with investors?
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
Yes, Amir, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think right now you see all these big investments. So privacy is definitely a buzzword there, whether they are going in the right pocket or not. I think security industry actually went on a too much of network centric path, and still it's trying to get data centric path. I'm actually so happy to talk, or rather for last 3 hours we are talking about data centric. So there's a lot of buzzword out there, but if you see larger investment, larger valuations, they're still actually going on this workflow based company, and that's not necessarily the privacy. That is the first step in the privacy. Yeah, there are some companies which are being funded for discovery, in terms of I think there were some big ticket deals on that. So yes, there is some traction, and we'll see also a lot of the stuff is on the buzzword. So we'll see some startups start fail depending on how they solve the business problems, in terms of. But I still don't see that there is like a huge amount of still enough capital out there. There is to be more, and it has to be actually invested on the right technology and right business problems to leave it long term. Otherwise we gonna see the similar way the way security industry went before, like only creating one or two, or rather three four unicorns and rest of the stuff. So uh, that's my thought process on that. So yes, some capital going on, but very early stage at the moment. Not late stage is only on the workflow based, or rather process flow companies.
Okay. What do you observe, Bhaskar?
Absolutely. I mean, compared to, let's say, a 5 year timeline, the interest, not just talking about it, but actually investing, it's definitely there. Um, and it will just continue, right? It will definitely continue. I mean, my theory is that it's probably not going to be tremendously ambitious in certain cases where it kind of comes in the way of how businesses make money today, right? And I mean, this point I keep repeating all the time that the more you tread towards privacy, unfortunately, the more you have to give up some of the conveniences that we so depend on and through which businesses make a lot of money. So while I definitely see compared to 5 years back, it's a lot more. Like both panelists pointed out, they are mostly on the workflow side. This will definitely continue. Uh, India, unfortunately, at least sitting here in right now, somehow has this. The world has a very wrong impression that good security products are not built in India. I think that's an absolute BS. I think it's a perception that needs to change. So over the next probably decade or so, you'll have more investments coming in. So I'm definitely hopeful about the industry. I mean, that's why we're all in it. But if you follow the adoption cycle that everybody is familiar with, right? It's a very familiar term. We're definitely on the left side of the halfway line by a huge margin, right? It's not mainstream conversation for sure.
Okay. I hope either some CIOs and CISOs and their teams, if they logged in, the message is going in that they need to invest more in the area of privacy and privacy technologies. Any comment on this line, Amar, including anything you want to share in terms of customer acquisitions, what has been your experience, and you could either cover on the customer side or the investor side.
So
Then
I
we'll
agree
take.
with other panel members. The focus still is on the workflow, yet still. But when we think about investors, there's a lot more. We're investing on core technologies, but these are seed round. It's not still like a $50 million round, $100 million round. No, still round, still good, right? You can build a good company, Series A and seed round. So there is definitely incoming interest to our company as well. So I bet are the same for others too. In terms of interest in privacy, they want to invest because people know it's going to grow. People don't know where it's going to grow, right? It's going to grow. So the investor side, definitely there is interest, but it's the same old, same way we see is there is a business. You have a problem, not just the technology, and then backwards how you use the technology to solve the problem. So start with the problem. If you know the problem, that's the right way to think about it. And from a customer point of view, the customers are still going to be majority US and Europe. Large companies, medium and some amount of medium, small, targeted. They're not talking about privacy much. So large companies, if you the pain points they are going to face are either meeting complaints or extracting value, right? So there will be a legal person sitting, we cannot use this data anymore. And the entire team will be screaming, no, I want to use this data. Oh, no, not at this. At this. Then your technology can come and broker the balance. Oh, we can do this while they can use the data. That's where the money is, the balance. How you are going to extract value, allow the company to extract value while preserving privacy, right? Or there is a knob where you can make them choose, right? That's what big companies do. If you talk to Google, they have a privacy engineering team. That's what they do. They measure privacy. They all these terms you talk about, KNN, everything they do. I talked to a few of them. They measure and consciously make a decision. So from a customer point of view, if you think the use cases are going to be large companies dealing with large of data, multinational companies, primarily US, Europe, and some of India is also catching up. I talked to a few of the top guys here. They are getting ready. So that's where I would focus from a use case. Start with the use case, then build a technology on for it. Sometimes going with technology is fine too, but then your target module, target acquisition, everything is different. But I'll rather build it with a use case and go backwards. And it's in the balance. It's in this balance between how will you use your data versus how will you protect your privacy. That's where we have to play.
So thanks, Amar. I think what I hear from all the panelists is there is increasing uptake and interest from investors, but still it's very early stage and seed kind of funding that's happening, barring a few exceptions, right? So I think we'll take some questions and then we can have some closing comments from all of you. There's a question from Srinivas.
Rama, somebody has raised his hand, so can we take that question first, please?
Sure.
That's a very good feature, huh?
Yeah. Hi. Good afternoon. My name is Dilip. I'm from Gloner. We are a small startup company, and we are continuously working on enhancing the privacy. So here, my question is to you that since we are going global and we have a lot of privacy laws like GDPR, Indian privacy, Philippines privacy, and US privacy, right? So the issue what we are facing right now is like transferring the data for processing. So how can we satisfy all the privacy laws where they say that okay, for GDPR it has to be processed only in EU, and India is coming that the data has to be stored in India only. So what is the way forward? What I just want you all to suggest on this.
Anyone wants to take that? But before that, I mean, just Dilip, yes, it is a problem. There are diverse regulations, and I think whenever any regulators meet, the expectation of the industry is how can these various data protection regulations be harmonized? But currently, We do have diverse things, but the basic privacy practices, that is a challenge. I mean, he's saying if I'm building a product or a solution for the global market, how do I, factor all the diverse regulations, all the upcoming ones, all the amendments that happen to each one of them? Any comments from any one of them? Any one of you?
I can take it high level.
Yeah.
If so, Dilip, yeah, I mean that's a very broad question, but I would say you want to basically point out, take two things in mind. Check the definition of processing. So, are you really processing the data? And number two, the regulations are now more than where the geography is. There are some data localization rule where you process, but more than that, whose data it is. So if you take US CCPA, it doesn't matter you process that in India or Europe or Philippines. If it is California residents data, you need to go by CCPA. GDPR is the same way, even actually more stricter. So I think those two things, if you look at that, and the third part, I would say the consent part, right? Do you have the consent and business purpose for that data? So I mean, there are a whole number of articles, but these high level three things, if you can actually go, you can limit your scope, what your obligations are. And I'll stop there basically. Bhaskar, you had something, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, Dilip. So obviously, I don't have much context about your startup and all that, but uh, I have a slightly different take on it, right? So I don't think young startups, and you said you're small, so I'm assuming you're a young startup. I don't think small startups should aim to boil the ocean. That's a recipe for disaster, right? So there is great value in trying to dominate one market. So I think you should forget about the world and take a geography. So hypothetically, let's say you're taking Middle East or whatever is a good geography and try and do there, right? Otherwise, all your efforts are going to be so kind of dispersed all over the place. And if you say that, okay, now we have at least 10% market share, as long as you're in GDPR, now you can think somewhere else, right? Because technically speaking, it's very easy to solve it. That you just have your workloads go to different clouds and you can choose data residency location. But I think it's more of a strategy discussion that where are you going to focus your energies, then kind of spread it all over the world.
Thanks.
Good advice, Bhaskar. Go deep, one, conquer and win in one market, and then you expand, particularly for an early startup. There's one question here, I think, from BB Srinivas, where there's a question around the way I see it, privacy engineering is unique, unlike security or other. Privacy engineering is not just about some technology, but it's a blend of policy, process, and technology. So they wanted any one of you to comment on, is privacy engineering just technology or it's a blend of policy and technology? Anyone, one of you can take that.
I can. So
Yes,
privacy engineering is a blend. It cannot be purely engineering. If you meet the people who are working in privacy engineering in the big organizations, you will see a variety of people. There will be UX designers, there will be technologists, there will be some purely policy makers. So it is a blend of different functionality coming together. So it is not purely technology. So when you think of privacy engineering products, there will be a blend of process as well as engineering in it, right? You cannot just throw a technology and expect it to solve, because the problem is so complex, because we are balancing multi-parties here: business, consumer interest, business interest, and regulation. When you kind of balancing this, technology alone will not cut it, right? That's the reason you need all those people to participate and do it. So it is a combination of all, is a blend. That's where you can make a difference and make an impact to the problem. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it's questionable. It's a blend of PPT, whatever we call people process technology.
I see some question around classification.
Rama, we cannot hear you.
Sorry,
Rama.
I'm
Rama,
saying
when
there's a question. Can you hear me? There's a question around classification of data on the basis of data utility. And I think Vijay wants to know, is there a technology that can help him segregate data based on the utility of data? Maybe from any one of you or any other product that you're familiar with. There are a lot of them actually.
Yeah, all the products will definitely will give you context in terms of when you can tag data depending on the purpose. It's kind of humongous task depending on the volume of the data. But yes, you can. There are tons of product out there. Just not one to mention here in terms of who can do, including ours or even depending on what exactly you are looking for. So when you say data utility, there are a lot of follow-up questions to be. But I said yes, there would be a lot of products. Feel free to send that question to panelists, and we'll be more than happy to actually handle that. I don't want to name the products or anything, being a generic the session here. But yes, there are a whole bunch of data discovery product which will help you
Right.
doing that.
I'll just take one more question before we wrap up. I think there's a specific question for a SaaS company. It's not so much about privacy technology. It's more about the clarity on basic privacy principles. Is that if there's a SaaS company which is using a third-party consent manager for taking all the data through the consent manager, uh, will the SaaS organization be a data fiduciary or a data processor? Will it be a data controller or a data processor? That's the question.
Clearly, data controller.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. You have the data and you're going to utilize it. You determine how you're going to use the data. That means you're a controller.
Yeah.
Processor is, you tell them, they process. In this case, the consent manager who is the processor, you are definitely a controller.
Yeah. Because you're defining the purpose for which you're collecting and
Exactly.
processing the
Exactly.
data.
Yes.
So, our understanding is that you will be a data controller or a data fiduciary. So,
I mean,
I don't.
if you're pulling some data from the third parties, then you can be processor too. But primarily, the data you own, you will be a controller. For data you actually take from other sources, probably to help your consumers, that will be probably under the processor. So in many cases, I think both come at together. But yes, for the data you are actually collecting for users, you will be the controller.
There's a question from Ankita from Grant Thornton. It's about data localization. She says data localization is interpreted very differently. So, how can they engage? So, Ankita, at least we in DSCI strongly oppose data localization unless it's some really national security kind of data. I do understand there are data protection regimes that are coming up with localization. Each of them will have some interpretation. So, I don't think there is a generic thing on what is localization, because what data needs to be localized may be different. Somebody might be saying healthcare data needs to be localized. Somebody is saying biometric data needs to be localized, or somebody may be saying financial data. So it obviously depends on the regulation in the geography that you are serving. I don't think a panel or I can take a shot at defining what is localization, because what is localization is going to vary based on what the regulation and the market that you're serving is. So I think we don't have time for questions. I just want to close with some closing comments with my three wonderful panelists who bring a lot of rich experience. So my question to you, where you can wrap up all your thoughts around this entire think privacy, think technology. Is it a near term, short term opportunity which will become real? CISOs and CIOs will wake up to that, or you think there's still a lot more evangelization we have to do? Because I think more startups are going to enter this field because of the regulations that are coming up and the expectation of users. But is there some more we need to do before customers invest in technology solutions for privacy? And also, if you have any closing comments on, in the post-COVID world, will this, pick up a little, will accelerate a little faster than its usual business cycles? Any one of you can start with Bhaskar.
Yeah. So, I think this is definitely a mid to long term kind of an industry, in my opinion, right? Right now, I think and all the panelists spoke about that. Right now, what's happening is workflows, consulting, things like am I a DPO or am I a processor or controller? These are all the things that are out there, not necessarily technological solutions to the problem of privacy. And whenever, in my context, when I say technological solutions, it's like I have something, now I have used technology to scale it very elegantly, right? So we're definitely not in that stage. What DSCI can potentially do is, whether it's a publicly released research or internal research, if you find out specific budget line items that CISOs have dedicated to privacy, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's probably very little, right? So it's definitely mid to long term. Um, so that's in general my opinion. It's not going to disappear, but I think there's so much more to do. And for us, sometimes it's a bit of a fulfilling prophecy, because I have so many feeds about privacy tech and privacy engineering. When I wake up in the morning, it feels like the whole world is talking about it, and oh my God, right? And then I go to some meeting where nobody's even heard about it. I'm like, so looks like my feed is biased towards what I want to read.